Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Because of the turtle walk, Bai Xiaochun understood quite a bit about spirit enhancement. He also was well aware that there was a Foundation Establishment elder from Violet Cauldron Peak who was a skilled spirit enhancer. For a few merit points, that elder would help disciples perform spirit enhancements, usually no more than a 1 or 2-fold enhancement. Any higher than that, and the chances of failure mounted. The fact that these two magical items had both received 3-fold enhancements meant that Bai Xiaochun wouldn't have to waste any fuel on his own 3-colored flame, and would also be able to freely use them in the public eye. After returning to Fragrant Cloud Peak, he immediately set to work familiarizing himself with the Golden Crow Sword and the Divine Crane Shield. As soon as he sent some spiritual power into them, they began to radiate intense heat. "Now these are some treasures," he exclaimed. Taking a deep breath, he performed an incantation gesture and pointed out. A thrumming sound filled the air as the Golden Crow Sword transformed into a golden beam of light that shot off, leaving behind a wake of burning heat that caused everything around it to ripple and distort. With another incantation gesture, he sent more spiritual power pouring into the sword, whereupon the bright glow surrounding it expanded until the vague shape of a golden crow became visible. It was little more than an outline, but the instant it appeared, incredible pressure began to weigh down, and the temperature in the area increased rapidly. All of that caused Bai Xiaochun's heart to thump excitedly. Panting, he stared at the Golden Crow Sword, eyes shining more and more brightly. Soon, he began to laugh in excitement. "This sword is way better than my little wooden sword. Wow, my master is awesome." With that, he dashed into motion, leaping up into the air and landing onto the back of the illusory Golden Crow. Although the Golden Crow was blurry and vague, its back was as flat and sturdy as a board, and when Bai Xiaochun sent some spiritual power into it, he felt almost as if he had become a part of it. After stepping onto the Golden Crow, he performed an incantation gesture and pointed out, which caused him to fly up into the air. Then he soared in a big circle around Fragrant Cloud Peak, whizzing through the air above the crowds. When people looked up in surprise, he would slow down, hold his head high, and puff his chest out. When cries of astonishment began to ring out, he would finally increase his speed again. "I, Bai Xiaochun, can finally fly." Spirits soaring, he laughed inwardly as his tour took him over the 10,000 Medicines Pavilion. However, it was only moments later, just as he was about to head toward one of the other mountain peaks, that the Golden Crow suddenly faded away, and the sword fell out of the sky. Bai Xiaochun screamed as he tumbled down along with it. Thankfully, what lay below wasn't a bottomless pit, but rather, one of the small paths that ran through the sect. He landed at a run, and only managed to gain control after several steps. Then he looked over and realized how high up this path was, and that if he had fallen off, even his undying skin wouldn't have saved him. His face went pale. That was way too dangerous, he thought, shivering. With that, he picked up the Golden Crow Sword. Probing his inner spiritual power, he realized that he had been almost completely drained, which was why he had ended up falling. For a chi condensation cultivator, flying on a sword took a huge amount of energy. Most who were in the 7th level of chi condensation would only be able to last for a few breaths of time before they had to stop. Even Bai Xiaochun, with his unusually refined spiritual power, couldn't even last 100 breaths. Fearful of falling to his death, he didn't dare to test the sword out anymore. Looking around furtively for a moment to see if anyone had seen what just occurred, he caught sight of a burly man off in the distance, who was staring at him, his jaw hanging open. When Bai Xiaochun saw him, his eyes widened and he hurried over. "Whoa, aren't you Sect Nephew Wolf?" When the burly man heard the words, Sect Nephew Wolf, he immediately shivered. Grimacing, he clasped hands and said, "I'm Disciple Lu Go. Greetings, Sect Uncle Bai. I didn't see anything happen just now." Bai Xiaochun had encountered Lu Go when he was selling spots in the outer sect. Back then, the man had called himself Lord Wolf. Bai Xiaochun humphed a few times, then proceeded to frighten Lu Go a bit more to ensure that he wouldn't spread news of what had happened. Then he patted him on the shoulder, gave some promises to help him out in the future, and finally left. Lu Go wiped the sweat from his brow before hurrying off. As he walked along, Bai Xiaochun rejoiced that it was only Lu Go who had seen his slight mishap. If it had happened when he was flying around by the 10,000 Medicines Pavilion, his name would have been ruined forever. People, you really can't become too famous. Then things just become difficult. Sighing to himself, he clasped his hands behind his back and strolled back to his courtyard residence. After a bit of hesitation about what to do, his eyes flickered with determination. No, I have to focus on cultivation. Only being able to fly a little bit isn't inherently bad, but what would happen if I was fleeing for my life? What if I escaped my enemies only to fall to my death? That would be really pointless. With that, he once again began to study the golden crow sword and the divine crane shield. Just to be safe, I should paint these two magical items as well. That way, people will think it's just a hobby of mine. Then if I pull out other spirit-enhanced magical items in the future, they won't think too much of it. After some more thought, he prepared some dye from brightly colored plants and proceeded to paint the golden crow sword and the divine crane shield. After covering up the faint spirit designs, he tested out the two items one more time. Finally, he looked pleased. One of these days when my skill in the Tao of medicine is high enough, I'll enhance some plant-based dyeing materials, and then I can be completely confident. Bai Xiaochun was an inherently cautious person. Although he had run amok to some extent because of becoming the junior brother of the sect leader, he had a bottom line that he wouldn't cross. What a pity my cultivation base still isn't high enough. The last time I was following Zhou Xinqi around, it seemed that she was already in the 8th level of qi condensation. The only way to be able to use a flying sword for any length of time is to have a higher cultivation base. Determination filled his heart. After the incident with the Luokan clan, he had come to fully understand how brutal the cultivation world could be. He had also realized that the ability to flee at top speed was crucial when one's life was on the line. If he had been able to fly on a sword back then, he would have been able to escape with Du Lingfei and Hu Yunfei no matter what the Luokan clan tried to do. I need to concoct pills, he thought, eyes gleaming. Considering his current status, although he couldn't get free ingredients from the sect, there were certain pill formulas that he could get for only a few merit points. In the following days, Fragrant Cloud Peak became a quiet place, and Bai Xiaochun was rarely seen. He acquired large amounts of medicine formulas, and also used the spirit stones and other items he had acquired from the Luokan clan members to go to the market and purchase a variety of medicinal plants. Then he made his way to the medicine concocting pavilion, where he went into seclusion to concoct medicine. Time flew by. A few months later, it had been nearly half a year since Bai Xiaochun returned to the sect. At first, the sect had been thrown into an uproar because of him, but then things had suddenly gone very quiet. Many people found it hard to adapt. At the same time, the fact that Bai Xiaochun had become a prestige disciple gradually spread outside of the sect. Soon, people all over the Eastwood continent came to hear of the matter. Of course, there were countless cultivator clans in the Eastwood continent, many of which were connected to the Spirit Stream sect in various ways. The Luokan clan had been only one among many such clans. To the disciples of the Spirit Stream sect, although the title of prestige disciple was to be looked up to, being the junior brother of the sect leader was even more impressive. However, to the cultivator clans at large, it was exactly the opposite. They would respect a prestige disciple far more than they would the junior brother of the sect leader. In fact, they almost didn't care at all about the sect leader's junior brother. In contrast, they would be driven to near madness by a prestige disciple. After hearing the news that Bai Xiaochun had become a prestige disciple, many patriarchs of the various cultivator clans got very excited. In their eyes, he was a virtual goldmine, a living prestige scion. If they could bring Bai Xiaochun into their clan, then his descendants would have almost limitless possibilities for the future. As the number of such descendants grew, and considering that the clan would have the support of the Spirit Stream sect, glory was guaranteed. To vassal clans in the cultivation world, it would ensure a meteoric rise, like the fish who jumped the Dragon Gate. After all, the Spirit Stream sect had only ever had 9 prestige clans. Those 9 clans could often influence the decision-making process of the sect as a whole. Although such influence wasn't necessarily very vast, it was still worthy of consideration. Such a clan would form a part of an enormously powerful entity, and would be the subject of intense envy from other cultivator clans. In the past, most clans couldn't influence anything. They could only offer allegiance to the Spirit Stream sect and then perform various services with the hope of gaining prestige status. But now, Bai Xiaochun had appeared. Most wonderful of all was that he wasn't a member of any cultivator clan. He came from the mortal world, and he had no Taoist partner. He was a free ticket to becoming the 10th prestige clan, and as such, all of the cultivator clans in the Eastwood continent were thrown into a frenzy. Find the prettiest maiden in the entire Zhou clan. She'll be coming with me to offer greetings to fellow Taoist Bai. Fair, you're the pearl of the Zhao clan. You have to get on Bai Xiaochun's good side. If he takes a liking to you, all of the problems of our clan will disappear. Although the daughters of the Sun clan aren't particularly outstanding, we still qualify to compete. Prepare an amazing gift for me to give when I go offer greetings to fellow Taoist Bai. Countless cultivator clans sprang into action, using all sorts of methods, including calling upon their clan members who were already within the sect to try to get in touch with Bai Xiaochun. Even the North Bank was affected. Soon, the name of Bai Xiaochun could be heard in all parts of the Eastwood continent. The Hu clan was no exception. The middle-aged patriarch of the Hu clan summoned Hu Yunfei and Hu Xiaomei, whereupon he expressed his sincere wishes. Yunfei, you have an unusually close relationship with Bai Xiaochun. You have to help out the clan in this matter. I can tell that your sister has taken a liking to Bai Xiaochun. Find a good chance to act as a matchmaker between them. Hu Xiaomei's face reddened. Pouting coquettishly, she hurried off. Hu Yunfei was a bit worried, but he put on a bold face and nodded in agreement. A few days later, people from numerous cultivator clans began to show up, gathering on fragrant Cloud Peak around Bai Xiaochun's residence. As news spread, some people even began to head toward the medicine-concocting pavilion, waiting anxiously for him to come out of seclusion. A few days later, a boom echoed out from Bai Xiaochun's pill-concocting workstation. Moments later, he appeared, frowning and looking anxious. Although I'm pretty familiar with Tier 1 medicinal pills now, he lamented, Tier 2 pills are a lot harder. Other than cultivation, his time recently had mostly been spent on concocting medicines. In his attempt to produce some Tier 2 spirit medicines, he'd already used up most of the plants and vegetation in his bag. Unfortunately, the degree of difficulty he was working with was vastly greater than before, and despite being meticulously careful, he had failed consistently. Each time he found that he had used too many materials, he would make adjustments. And yet even then, new problems would arise. Sighing in despair, he walked out of the medicine-concocting pavilion and looked up to find a large host of people sitting there cross-legged. Most of them sat in groups of 3 to 5, with a few groups of 10 in sight. The majority were pretty young women, none of whom were familiar to Bai Xiaochun. They were all different shapes and sizes, but each one was beautiful in her own way. The lot of them were clearly vying with each other to be the most glamorous, and as soon as they saw Bai Xiaochun emerge, their eyes shone brightly. Most had older folks sitting next to them, who also seemed delighted to see Bai Xiaochun. In fact, they all rose to their feet and rushed over in a hubbub. Taken aback, and a bit unsure of what was going on, Bai Xiaochun subconsciously stepped back a few paces. Hey, hold on, what are you people doing? Fellow Taoist Bai, I'm Zhao Tianhai. Zhao Yiduo is my nephew. Ha ha ha. Fellow Taoist Bai, you truly are a young hero, a man of striking appearance and talent. Fellow Taoist Bai, what a dragon among men, heroic and extraordinary. A single glance reveals that he's like a rock soaring among the clouds, someone with unlimited potential. Ahem, I am Sun Yunshan, and these young women are all beauties from my clan. Fellow Taoist, if I'm not mistaken, you're lacking in terms of maidservants, correct? Fellow Taoist Bai, I am Zhou Tian. A single glance at you, fellow Taoist Bai, and I can clearly sense your heroic spirit. You are obviously the future overlord of the Eastern cultivation world. We were destined to be friends at first sight. Look at these young women standing next to me. Every single one is a precious pearl of the Zhou clan. A clamor of voices rang out, each one trying to speak first and loudest. Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide, and he retreated a few more steps. However, it only took a moment for him to realize that these people had come to offer their clan daughters to him. He wasn't sure exactly why it was happening, but upon looking the young women over, he could see that all of them were exceptionally beautiful. In fact, many of them could be counted as being his type. The way they were being offered up seemed to indicate that if he didn't accept, he would be refusing to give them face. Instantly, Bai Xiaochun was on guard. Of course, he was adept at dealing with people, so he didn't let any hint of that show on his face. A broad smile appeared, and after exchanging some meaningless pleasantries with the spokesmen from the various cultivator clans, he managed to extricate himself. However, before he could reach his residence, he ran into others who had stationed themselves along the way. All of them had similar words to speak with him, and offered him their clan daughters as well as other gifts and promises. Something big must have happened, but what, he thought. Could it be that they found out one of my ancestors was an immortal? Maybe I'm not from the mortal world after all. I'm actually descended from some exalted, powerful individual? Heavens, how could I not have been aware? Mind spinning, he hurried along until his residence came in view. However, it was surrounded by a crowd of individuals from various cultivator clans, all of whose eyes glistened with hope. It was as if the mere nod of Bai Xiaochun's head would cause them to do anything he wished. That was especially true of the young women. They all clustered around Bai Xiaochun, glaring antagonistically at each other, pushing and shoving each other back and forth. The sight of it all caused Bai Xiaochun's scalp to go numb. He was completely surrounded, and no matter which way he tried to move, he ran into something soft and warm. They even began to tug at his clothing, causing his heart to pound. Finally, a cold snort rang out, and Hu Xiaomei appeared. Glaring angrily, cheeks puffed, she stormed up to him, shoving the other young women aside. Get out of my way. What do you people think you're doing? This is Fragrant Cloud Peak of the Spirit Stream Sect. Don't you bunch of old coots know how to keep your cool? Get out of my way, all of you. Hey you, look at you, you're skinnier than a green bean. What are you shoving people around for? And you're fatter than a dairy cow. Get the hell out of my way. Hu Xiaomei sounded genuinely furious as she pushed aside all of the young women crowding around Bai Xiaochun. She was small and delicate, but she was fuming, and seemed to be filled with boundless strength. Facing such opposition, the other young women immediately surrendered and opened a path, crying out in confusion. Hu Xiaomei stormed forward with her hands on her hips, looking like a chili pepper, the words she uttered incisive and damaging. Bai Xiaochun took advantage of the moment to hurry into the courtyard. Once inside, he looked down to find that his garments had been tugged at so much that they were about to fall off. Absolutely terrifying, he thought, gasping. Heart-pounding with residual fear, he looked back out through the main gate and saw Hu Xiaomei standing there verbally sparring with the other young women, standing alone against a crowd of dozens. Eventually, the responsible members of the cultivator clans couldn't stand idly by. They finally intervened and suggested to the young women that they leave. Clasping hands respectfully in Bai Xiaochun's direction, they promised to come back to visit at a later date. Soon, it was evening. It was quiet outside of Bai Xiaochun's gate, but off in the distance, people from various cultivator clans were sitting cross-legged in meditation, seemingly guarding the area. All of these people had used various means and methods to come from afar, and also had ways to keep themselves from being driven away. Bai Xiaochun was sure that something momentous had occurred. Looking at the quiet scene outside, he eventually dragged Hu Xiaomei into the courtyard. To outsiders, Hu Xiaomei was as fiery as a hot pepper, but as soon as Bai Xiaochun's hand made contact with her, her face turned bright red, and she felt dizzy. Her tiny frame almost went limp as Bai Xiaochun dragged her inside. When she spoke, her voice was as soft as the drone of a mosquito. Big bro Xiaochun, there are so many people around, what are you planning to do to me? Huh? Bai Xiaochun said, staring in shock. Seeing Hu Xiaomei's odd countenance, he could tell that something was wrong with her, and quickly slapped her cheek. When she didn't seem to recover, he slapped her again. Hu Xiaomei immediately regained her senses. What's wrong with you? She snapped, stamping her foot. However, realizing she had been the one in the wrong, she tossed a jade slip to him, and then turned heel and fled. As he watched Hu Xiaomei flee into the distance, Bai Xiaochun stood there wondering what was going on. Finally, he looked down at the jade slip and scanned it with spiritual power. As he did, his eyes went wide. After scanning it again, he stood there in the courtyard, breathing heavily. Prestige Clan. The jade slip had been sent to Bai Xiaochun by Hu Yunfei, with Hu Xiaomei being the messenger. The words contained within were the type that almost couldn't be uttered aloud. They explained why all of the cultivator clans were so interested in Bai Xiaochun's status as a prestige disciple, and what had occurred as a result. They also explained that the Hu clan held an intense hope that Bai Xiaochun's descendants would also have the blood of the Hu clan running in their veins. Then Bai Xiaochun thought about how Hu Xiaomei had been acting just now, and he rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Eyes sparkling, he thought, not about Hu Xiaomei, but about his own words from moments ago. Something momentous had occurred. How could I have imagined? And here I thought the reward for my meritorious service was basically useless. I thought that being the junior brother of the sect leader would make me a big hero in the sect, but I never thought that being a prestige disciple would make me so important on the outside. He licked his lips, and soon, his heart began to beat faster. I could pick any Taoist partner I wanted. All of their clan resources would be at my disposal. Finally, I have some real hope to live forever. Chuckling mischievously, his eyes began to shine. Previously, he had been worried about how to keep up his efforts to concoct Tier 2 spirit medicine. But now, people were essentially fighting over the chance to give him gifts. What a pity I can't accept them all, he murmured. But then, he was struck with inspiration. Wait a second, why can't I accept them all? Clearing his throat, he entered his cabin to rest for the evening, thinking the whole time about what to do next. The following morning at dawn, he leapt out of bed, trembling with excitement. After pushing open the gate of the courtyard, he found a whole host of people from various cultivator clans waiting for him. Fellow Taoist Bai. Greetings, fellow Taoist Bai. Your humble servant has come upon the request of our clan patriarch to offer formal greetings. Everyone started talking at once, filling the air with a cacophony of sound. Bai Xiaochun stuck his chin up and flicked his sleeve. All right, enough is enough, he said, smiling so widely that his eyes became slits. Everyone come close. Whatever requests you have, we can talk them all out. With that, he randomly nodded in the direction of one of the clans. The responsible member of the clan rushed forward in delight, dragging a few young women with him. The women approached, looking a bit nervous. As for all of the other observing clans, they also seemed nervous, although for different reasons, they quickly began to transmit messages back home. Things went on like that for the next clan, and then the next. One by one, all day, Bai Xiaochun met with dozens of them. He didn't choose any of the clan daughters, and yet, neither did he refuse anyone. He merely told them that he needed some time to think, and that the matter was too weighty to decide on a whim. As for all of the introductory gifts, he didn't refuse a single one. I, Bai Xiaochun, always handle all matters in a just and fair manner. Considering that I haven't yet chosen which honorable clan to ally with in marriage, I truly am unable to accept your gifts. Those were the words he would speak to each and every clan. Of course, the more he spoke in such a way, the more the cultivator clans insisted that he accept their gifts. In fact, they grew even more polite. Many of them went on to say that even if no marriage resulted, they still wished to be good friends. Only then did Bai Xiaochun reluctantly accept the gifts. Although they might be fools, the people from these cultivator clans weren't stupid. They knew that when Bai Xiaochun said he needed to think about the matter, he was most likely just waiting to see which clan would make the best offer. That, of course, was within the purvey of expectation. Furthermore, all of them feared that if they didn't offer their gifts, Bai Xiaochun wouldn't even consider their clan daughter to be his Taoist partner. The result was that the next day, the crowds hadn't thinned at all, and in fact, had grown more numerous. Furthermore, some of the cultivator clans even went so far as to say that even if their clan daughter couldn't become Bai Xiaochun's Taoist partner, they were still willing for her to be a maidservant to warm his bed at night. As long as she could pass on his bloodline, and he acknowledged them formally, that would be sufficient. All of the visiting clans continued to offer more and more gifts. In fact, it got to the point where Bai Xiaochun was getting a bit nervous. Eventually, he truly wanted to refuse, and yet wasn't able to. Fine, I guess I'll accept. Not accepting isn't really an option, huh? For 7 or 8 days in a row, he continued to receive the clans and accept their gifts. Every morning at dawn, he would walk out to find a whole host of people waiting for him. 3 more days passed. When dawn broke, Bai Xiaochun pushed open the main gate, whereupon his jaw dropped. Shockingly, not a single person could be seen. Everything was peaceful and quiet. As far as the eye could see, the area was empty. The only things he could see were some 5-colored phoenixes, flying gracefully high above. The phoenixes were the beloved pets of Elder Zhou, and often soared above fragrant Cloud Peak around dawn. They would usually fly together in a flock, and were especially beautiful. Many disciples were jealous of them. Bai Xiaochun rubbed his eyes and looked around. Thinking that perhaps he had opened the gate incorrectly, he went back in, closed it, and then tried again. However, the result was the same. What's going on? He thought, shocked. He quickly went off to find Hu Yunfei to ask for an explanation. Hu Yunfei sighed and looked at Bai Xiaochun. Last night, the sect leader issued a dharmic decree. As your elder brother, he notified the cultivator clans, that according to sect rules, you can't accept a Taoist partner within the next 100 years. Therefore, everyone had no choice but to leave. Bai Xiaochun's jaw dropped. Feeling very wronged, he said, "No more income. No more marriage." Hu Yunfei wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. A moment later, though, he thought of something, and said, "Xiaochun, a friend of mine from Green Crest Peak told me that you and Shangguan Tianyu have a beef with each other. Is that right? Well, just be aware that Qian Daijin isn't important at all. However you choose to deal with him, the sect will tacitly agree. But things aren't so simple when it comes to Shangguan Tianyu." "What do you mean, not so simple?" Bai Xiaochun asked. "Is he more important than me or something?" Having been a member of the Spirit Stream sect for so many years, Bai Xiaochun was well aware of how the sect tried to train its disciples. They pushed them toward greatness, prohibited deadly conflicts, and encouraged both cooperation and competition. Sect rules governed basic behavior. The elders of the various mountain peaks, as well as the peak lords themselves, provided assistance and training. And the Hall of Justice was a looming threat to deter bad behavior. The sect essentially had all aspects under control. Of course, considering that between the north and south banks the Spirit Stream sect had several 100,000 disciples, it was obviously impossible to micromanage everything. Disciples would have conflicts and fights, and certain improper attitudes were impossible to control. However, the rewards and punishments in place were clear, and anyone who violated them would be strictly dealt with. Bai Xiaochun had performed an incredible service for the sect, possessed profound skill with plants and vegetation, and could unleash extraordinary battle prowess. The sect was naturally aware of that, and valued him greatly. Of course, they didn't cater to his every whim like a servant. If people insulted or provoked him, they wouldn't leap out to protect him. No disciple enjoyed such treatment, neither Shangguan Tianyu nor Bai Xiaochun. Because of that, Bai Xiaochun was of the belief that Shangguan Tianyu, an arrogant, famous chosen who other outer sect disciple went so far as to call young lord, was still not worthy of his own attention. After a moment of thought, Hu Yunfei responded, eyes shining as he told Bai Xiaochun everything he knew. Shangguan Tianyu has great ambitions. He hopes that one day he will be able to enter the legendary legacy echelon. As such, he has continuously kept his cultivation base suppressed, keeping him between the outer and inner sects. When the next trial by fire for chosen from the north and south banks comes, he wants to take first place and enter the inner sect at the top. That will earn him the chance to enter the legacy echelon. Were it not for that, he would have long since applied for an ordinary trial by fire to enter the inner sect. After all, anyone who reaches the 8th level of qi condensation may do so. Shocked, Bai Xiaochun asked, "How come everyone wants to get into the legacy echelon?" "Shu Baosai told me that Zhou Xinqi, Lu Tinlei, and everyone else wants to." Members of the legacy echelon have a similar status to prestige disciples. However, it's a different branch within the Spirit Stream sect. You see, the Spirit Stream sect is different from other sects. We have two branches, one of which focuses on protecting the sect, and one of which focuses on increasing its glory and power. Everyone from the servants to the disciples in the 3rd level of qi condensation are lumped together in one lower group. Those from the 4th to the 8th level of qi condensation constitute the outer sect. At the 8th level, you can apply for a trial by fire to enter the inner sect. If you can reach foundation establishment, then you can become a foundation establishment elder, and maybe even a peak lord. After 2 60-year cycles pass, if you break through to the gold core level, then you can become a prime elder, responsible for protecting and managing the sect. That is the first branch. The second branch is the legacy echelon. There is only one way to get in, and that is, to break through to the gold core level before 2 60-year cycles pass. From then on, you will become a tool to ensure that our sect earns an even greater position in the cultivation world, that it acquires even more powerful resources and wealth. Anyone who takes first place in the chosen battles will be in line to enter the legacy echelon. I'm not really sure about the exact details, but I do know that there are rules about the whole thing. The only thing is, reaching the gold core level before 2 60-year cycles pass is very, very difficult. Of the members of the previous generation, the only person who has even come close is Peak Lord Li Qinghao. That's why the sect favors him so much. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath. This was his first time hearing an explanation of the legacy echelon, which also gave him a much clearer understanding of the sect itself. Soon, he left, and as he made his way off, he continued to ponder the matter. Legacy Echelon. Sighing, Bai Xiaochun left Hu Yunfei's residence and returned to his own courtyard. He looked up at the sky, then around at the surrounding scenery, and thought about the cultivator clans. In his opinion, his elder brother sect leader had acted a bit domineering, and yet, even though it was now impossible to collect any more gifts, at least there was no need to return the ones he had already taken. Yeah, it's not my fault, it's the fault of elder brother sect leader's dharmic decree. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Bai Xiaochun felt a bit better. After organizing all of the gifts, he went down to the market to buy a large quantity of medicinal plant ingredients for Tier 2 spirit medicines. Then, he returned to the medicine concocting pavilion to continue his cultivation and concocting work. The truth was that originally, Zheng Yuandong didn't want to get involved in the matter with Bai Xiaochun and the cultivator clans. However, the events had unfolded in shocking fashion. The previous 9 prestige disciples had all been conferred their titles posthumously, after being killed in battle. Furthermore, all of them had been members of various other cultivator clans. Although none of them had ever had any direct descendants, they all had relatives among their various clans. Because of that, no problems had ever arisen, and their clans had smoothly transitioned into being prestige clans. Of course, the sect highly valued and also protected such clans. But now, Bai Xiaochun was a living prestige disciple, a terrifying status to say the least. At first, it hadn't been obvious, and time had simply passed by. Zheng Yuandong and many others never thought much about what it meant to have a living prestige scion in their midst, and how enticing such a person would be to the cultivator clans. But then, the cultivator clans began to show up in great numbers. At first, Zheng Yuandong had merely observed the goings-on. As far as he was concerned, it didn't really matter which clan Bai Xiaochun picked. How could he have ever imagined that with all the competition, the clans would have gone to the lengths of offering their clan daughters as handmaidens, just to acquire someone with Bai Xiaochun's bloodline? Zheng Yuandong could only imagine what would happen if Bai Xiaochun gave in to the temptation. If that happened, it wouldn't be long before he could sire hundreds of descendants. According to the clan rules, all first-generation descendants of a prestige disciple were automatically allowed to enter the inner sect, and would receive special treatment and training. Furthermore, after those descendants began to propagate, there would be hundreds of branches of the prestige clan. Within a few hundred years, the entire spirit stream sect would be filled with the Bai clan. The final results would be grave indeed. In addition to all that, as long as Bai Xiaochun remained alive, all he had to do was continue to sire offspring, and the matter would never end. He would become a living nightmare for the sect. Because of such considerations, Zheng Yuandong held an emergency meeting with the sect elders, including the prime elders. Their joint decision was that Bai Xiaochun could not accept a Taoist partner for 100 years. Although it was a bit overbearing, Zheng Yuandong felt that there was no other option. He didn't want to bet everything on Bai Xiaochun's ability to resist temptation. He could only hope that after 100 years, Bai Xiaochun would grow up and be a bit more mature. Time passed. Soon, a year had gone by. During that time, it was almost as if Bai Xiaochun had gone missing from the South Bank. Few people ever saw him. He spent all of his time concocting medicine and practicing cultivation. He rarely left the medicine concocting pavilion, where he worked hard at producing Tier 2 spirit medicine. His cultivation base had also slowly made progress. Soon, he was in the middle of the 7th level of qi condensation. Furthermore, he resolved one problem after another when it came to concocting Tier 2 spirit medicine. The truth was that most other journeyman apothecaries at his level would have long since concocted Tier 2 medicines. But Bai Xiaochun was stubborn, and refused to start concocting another batch without first resolving each and every problem he found in the previous batch. Eventually, after an entire year, he was finally convinced that he had resolved all of the issues regarding the concoction of Tier 2 spirit medicine. With all the problems gone, he began yet another batch. Violet Qi Spirit Ascension Pills, he exclaimed, eyes bloodshot. They were a Tier 2 medicinal pill suitable for the 8th level of qi condensation and under. Following the recipe precisely, he selected numerous types of plants and vegetation, organized them carefully, and then began to feed them into the pill furnace. After carefully adjusting the earth flame, he kept a close eye on the pill furnace, occasionally adjusting the spiritual energy he fed inside. After 6 hours passed, the pill furnace suddenly began to shake. A strong medicinal aroma wafted out, and Bai Xiaochun's eyes began to shine brightly. Leaning toward the pill furnace, he slapped it on the side, whereupon 3 red medicinal pills flew out. It worked, he exclaimed excitedly. Grabbing the 3 pills, he looked them over. But then, his eyes went wide. Hold on a second. Something's not right. According to the description, violet chi spirit ascension pills are supposed to be violet. How come these ones are red? After scratching his head for a moment, he lifted the pills up to his nose and inhaled deeply. The medicinal aroma was strong, and contained plenty of spiritual energy. However, the smell was somewhat odd, and considering that they were the incorrect color, he didn't dare to consume them. Sitting there thoughtfully, he thought back to all of the various steps he had taken during the concocting process. 2 hours later, his eyes snapped open, and he laughed bitterly. I put in a bit too much superagate flower pollen. That tainted the rest of the medicinal plant ingredients, producing this strange side effect. With that, he placed the 3 red medicinal pills off to the side, and once again began to concoct. This time, when the pill furnace began to shake, and the medicinal aroma spread out, a single violet medicinal pill flew out. After examining it closely, an expression of deep satisfaction appeared on Bai Xiaochun's face. He quickly began another batch. In the following days, he continued to produce more batches, until he had a few dozen violet chi spirit ascension pills. That having been accomplished, he sat down off to the side, exhausted. After some rest, he produced the red pills and looked at them with some hesitation. As far as he was concerned, each and every one of the pills he had just concocted was very valuable, and furthermore, when it came to ingredients, he was already starting to run short. According to the concocting instructions, as long as the pill is formed, it counts as a success. These red violet chi spirit ascension pills have a bit too much superagate flower pollen, which caused their color to change. However, all that means is that they will have lost some effectiveness. After a moment of hesitation, he slapped his bag of holding to produce a green bamboo needle. It was an item he had acquired from the sect for use in medicine concocting, which could be used to make a general assessment of whether any given medicinal pill was toxic or not. After carefully inserting the needle into one of the red medicinal pills, he waited for a moment, then pulled it back out. The bamboo needle looked exactly the same as before, as opposed to being black. Not toxic, he said with a sigh of relief. However, out of caution, he still chose not to consume any of the red pills. Instead, he held them in hand as he left the medicine concocting pavilion. Outside in the dawn air, he began to walk down one of the small paths that wound through the sect. Up above, he could see a flock of 5 colored phoenixes gliding elegantly through the air, occasionally making piercing cries that echoed out. Ignoring the phoenixes, he headed toward one of the local spirit-tail chicken farms, where he acquired a spirit-tail chicken. After returning to his courtyard, he put the chicken down and then tossed one of the red medicinal pills out in front of it. The spirit-tail chicken had originally been sitting there looking a bit tired. But then it caught sight of the red medicinal pill. A tremor ran through it, and it suddenly leapt to its feet, rushed forward and pecked down toward the pill. However, it was at this exact moment that an intensely powerful cry rang out from up above. Then, a powerful wind gusted by, and before the spirit-tail chicken could reach the pill, it was blown off of its feet. A bit frightened, Bai Xiaochun leapt backward. At the same time, the 5 colored phoenixes closed in from up above, eyes wide, fighting amongst themselves the entire way. Finally, one of the strongest among the group, a male, succeeded in shoving aside his companions, whereupon he snapped up the medicinal pill and swallowed it down. Looking with contempt at the spirit-tail chicken that had been blown off to the side, the phoenix then flew up gracefully into the air. Bai Xiaochun wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Eyes wide, he could do nothing but watch as the phoenix ascended upward. However, after flying only a short way, the elegant phoenix began to shake, and then let out a protracted wail. His eyes turned bright red as they filled with veins of blood. All of his feathers suddenly stood on end, making him look like a fireball that was about to explode. Even more shocking was that the powerful male phoenix's muscles began to swell and ripple. Cracking sounds emanated out as the entire phoenix grew larger. Most notable of all was how the feathered area between his 2 legs suddenly bulged with something hard and rod-like. A very peculiar expression could be seen on the face of the male phoenix as he looked around at the other phoenixes. The other phoenixes trembled, and were about to scatter, when the male phoenix charged madly toward them. Next, miserable shrieks began to ring out. Bai Xiaochun stood there in his courtyard, looking on aghast as the bulging male phoenix, violated all of the other phoenixes. Moments later, unsated, the phoenix turned in his direction, his eyes burning just as red as before, his entire body seemingly bursting with flames. Terrified, Bai Xiaochun fled, barely able to hold back from screaming. Thankfully, the phoenix was actually targeting, not him, but the spirit tail chicken. Soon after, he watched as the male phoenix flew back toward the top of the mountain, clamoring loudly the entire way. Only after that did Bai Xiaochun wipe the sweat off of his brow. Simply terrifying, he thought, looking down at the remaining 2 medicinal pills he held in hand. Just what kind of medicinal pills are these? His heart began to pound as he realized that they must be some type of aphrodisiac. Clearly, they were also very effective. That day was a day that would never be forgotten by the disciples of Fragrant Cloud Peak. All birds on the mountain, regardless of what type they were ravaged by Elder Zhou's maddened phoenix. Countless disciples watched as one bird after another let out miserable shrieks. Although the birds tried as best they could to escape, none of them were a match for Elder Zhou's phoenix. None managed to flee. The villainous phoenix didn't even spare the spirit tail chickens, much less the other birds that Elder Zhou had raised. Anything on the mountain with wings experienced a living nightmare that day. All of the disciples were talking about the matter, and their hearts trembled. Soon, word spread to Violet Cauldron Peak and Green Crest Peak. Some people even came over to see the miraculous events which were unfolding for themselves. Did you hear that over on Fragrant Cloud Peak, one of Elder Zhou's phoenixes went mad? It started pouncing on any bird it saw. I saw it with my own eyes. What a savage phoenix. It didn't even spare the passing magpies. Just what was Elder Zhou doing, huh? How could he let his phoenix act like that? It was really infuriating, you know? That phoenix seemed really turned on. It pounced on some of those birds over and over again. It was brutal. When Bai Xiaochun heard the talk going around the sect, he began to tremble and even felt a bit guilty. It isn't my fault, he said to himself. It's really not my fault. I was trying to give that pill to the spirit tail chicken. That phoenix stole it. Feeling wronged, he hurried back to the medicine concocting pavilion. After some thought, he came to the conclusion that there was no way anyone would figure out what had happened. There he sat in the medicine concocting pavilion, sighing as he pulled out the remaining 2 red medicinal pills, which he then looked at thoughtfully. These medicinal pills are actually really powerful. Maybe I could use them as trump cards in a fight. If I ever run into some wild beasts in the future, I'll have nothing to fear. Well, if I want to use them as trump cards, then I better create another pill which can incite intense desire in females. The 2 can complement each other. Bai Xiaochun could well imagine how 2 such pills could work together. If he encountered some dangerous beast in the future, he would merely throw a pill in one direction and then run off in the other. It was an exciting prospect, but the downside was that he had no medicinal formula to work with. After pondering the matter for a while, and considering all of the various types of plants and vegetation that he knew about, he mentally prepared his own medicine formula. About the time that Bai Xiaochun was considering how to create his own medicine formula, Elder Zhou returned to his residence at the top of Fragrant Cloud Peak. There, he stared at the ravaged and listless phoenixes, and then turned his head to see the male phoenix off in the distance, pouncing on a spirit tail chicken. Miserable shrieks then began to ring out. Elder Zhou's mind almost exploded. Trembling violently, he stood there feeling as if the entire world were spinning around him. Enraged, he cried out, "Who did this?" Elder Zhou's voice filled the entirety of Fragrant Cloud Peak, echoing out in all directions. Strange expressions could be seen on the faces of countless disciples as they heard his words. After all, the events of that day had shaken everyone. The other elders on Fragrant Cloud Peak were also shocked by the ghastly events. The male phoenix was one of Elder Zhou's beloved pets, and therefore, no one was willing to even get near it. If the maddened beast were to accidentally be harmed, Elder Zhou would certainly be incensed. Most importantly, Elder Zhou was the only person on Fragrant Cloud Peak who enjoyed raising fine birds, and considering it was his personal affair, no one was willing to interfere. As for the spirit tail chickens, Li Qinghao was away, and his apprentice Zhou Xinqi had little power to do anything. Besides, the male phoenix was especially powerful, leaving Zhou Xinqi with no other option than to observe from afar, her face flushed, not daring to even step forward. When Elder Zhou saw what was happening, he couldn't stop shaking. His heart twinged as he watched the clamoring phoenix, and when he looked around at the rest of the dispirited and listless birds, he wished to cry, and yet could find no tears. Considering Elder Joe's skill in the Tao of medicine, he could tell at a glance that someone had given the phoenix some sort of medicine. I'll definitely find out who was responsible for this. Meanwhile, Bai Xiaochun was in his workstation in the medicine concocting pavilion. Although he was mostly cut off from the sounds outside, Elder Joe's enraged roar reached his ears, and his heart trembled. Then an outraged expression appeared on his face as he contemplated how he was truly being unfairly accused. He could only hope that it would be impossible to connect the matter to him, and that Elder Joe wouldn't come after him. Scowling, he began to recall the exact steps he had gone through to create the aphrodisiac pill, and began to contemplate how to make it even more effective. After several days of study and contemplation, he went out a few times to purchase medicinal plants, and even spent some merit points to acquire a few other rare ingredients. Finally, he returned to the medicine concocting pavilion to attempt to concoct the pill. Soon, explosions began to ring out. In some ways, it was true that Bai Xiaochun had already created his own medicine formula back in the trial by fire to become a journeyman apothecary. However, that was more a situation of enlightenment and adjustments to an existing formula. It was different from the current situation, in which was truly inventing something new. The levels of difficulty couldn't even be compared. In fact, based on Bai Xiaochun's skill in the Tao of medicine at the time of his promotion to journeyman apothecary, he would never have been able to do something like this. But now, after a year of experience and further research into the Tao of medicine, he was more than ready to make such an attempt. Although he wasn't fully proficient, he had already begun to walk a path that other journeyman apothecaries couldn't even imagine. It was a path that only master apothecaries could attempt to understand. Time passed. Half a month later, Bai Xiaochun was still in the medicine concocting pavilion, immersed in his attempt to create a medicine formula. After numerous attempts, he was beginning to shape his ideas into one concise concept. Even as he excitedly began to concoct another batch, Elder Joe stood atop Fragrant Cloud Peak, a pained expression on his face as he fed a medicinal pill to a weak, listless phoenix. "Relax and recover," he said. "All those things you did weren't in accord with your true desires. None of it was your fault. Just wait until you've recovered, and I'll take you to find the person who fed that pill to you. I don't care who it is, I will see to it that he pays the price." A brutal gleam appeared in Elder Joe's eyes. During the past half-month, he had conducted a thorough investigation of Fragrant Cloud Peak, and had even made inquiries in the other mountain peaks of the South Bank. Unfortunately, he hadn't turned up a single clue. The only option he had next was to wait until the phoenix recovered, and then take it to search for the culprit. During the course of his investigation, he had come to find that Fragrant Cloud Peak had become a place that winged birds avoided like the plague. Because of the tragic events which had occurred half a month before, it was as if the air above the mountain had been filled with a shocking aroma. Any bird who smelled it wouldn't dare to draw near. Even the spirit-tailed chickens spent their days trembling and scared out of their minds. The disciples who cared for the chickens could only scowl miserably, not daring to give voice to their anger. As the matter festered, a whole series of rumors began to spread. "Do you remember what happened with the birds a few weeks ago? I heard that the bird in question ate some of Elder Joe's medicine. That's why it changed so suddenly. The only thing I don't understand is that Elder Joe is still pretty young. Why would he be concocting medicine like that?" "Shish, keep your voice down. Do you know why Elder Joe likes to raise birds? There's a very tragic secret involved. The truth is that for his entire life, Elder Joe has never had a Taoist partner." "Ahem, you know what I mean, right? Heavens, how deranged. Could it be that because that bird couldn't take any more of Elder Joe's torment, it finally went mad?" The more the rumors spread, the more exaggerated they became. Eventually, all of the disciples on Fragrant Cloud Peak were spreading them. When each person passed the news along, they couldn't help but add details from their own imagination, until countless versions of the story could be heard. When Elder Joe caught wind of it, he got so mad he very nearly coughed up a mouthful of blood. He was of a mind to put an end to the rumors, but no matter how he tried to explain things to people, they would just look at him oddly. Although they quickly put respectful expressions on their faces, his explanations did no good, and the rumors continued to fly. Another half-month passed. One day, Elder Joe appeared, bristling with a murderous aura, his expression unprecedentedly ferocious. The wave of his hand sent the recovered male phoenix flying out. Surprisingly, it was just as large as it had been before, and was actually a bit stronger. Clearly, it had actually profited from its previous disaster. When Elder Joe saw that, he felt a bit better. However, the anger in his heart still needed an outlet. He had seen the fear in the eyes of countless disciples in the sect over the last month. Even members of his own generation cleared their throats in his presence, and wore odd expressions on their faces. And then there were the rumors, which left him seething in fury. At long last, he was able to bring his phoenix out into the open. "Find me the person who gave you that medicine," he said through gritted teeth. The phoenix let out a piercing cry as it flew up into the air. Elder Joe followed along, his murderous aura growing more and more intense. Quite a few disciples on Fragrant Cloud Peak were paying attention to the goings-on, and some of them even began to follow from a distance. Soon, it was obvious that the male phoenix was flying toward Bai Xiaochun's residence. When it arrived, it began to fly in circles up above. Then it turned and glanced at Elder Joe, looking very maligned as it let out whimpering calls. Apparently, it was telling Elder Joe that this was the place where it had consumed the medicinal pill. When the disciples who had followed along saw what was happening, their eyes went wide. But then they realized who the residence belonged to, and they blinked oddly. "That looks like Sect Uncle Bai's residence." "Yeah, it's definitely Sect Uncle Bai's." If the matter were blamed on anyone else, I might not believe it. But considering we're talking about Sect Uncle Bai, it actually makes sense. Elder Joe hovered there in midair, trembling, eyes crimson. Gnashing his teeth, he growled, "Bai Xiaochun." Now that he had found the culprit of the disaster, he scanned the area with divine sense. Having found that the residence was empty, he waved his right hand, producing a jade slip that, based on his authority in the sect, could track Bai Xiaochun down wherever he was. Soon, he found that Bai Xiaochun was in the medicine concocting pavilion. Normally, Elder Joe was a calm person, but right now his face twisted with ferocious anger as he led his phoenix toward the medicine concocting pavilion. The surrounding disciples of Fragrant Cloud Peak were starting to get excited. They began to send messages to their friends, and soon word was spreading throughout the mountain. "Hurry up, the culprit who drove that bird crazy has been found out. Sect Uncle Bai did it." Countless disciples, even some from the inner sect, all heard the news. Trembling with excitement, they hurried out to see what they could see. The feelings of torment they had experienced because of Bai Xiaochun now turned into anticipation. In fact, the more torment they had experienced, the more excited they were now. Chen Ziying rushed out, looking thrilled. Zhao Yiduo raced out at about the same time. The two of them exchanged pleased glances, and then raced in Bai Xiaochun's direction as quickly as possible. Among the crowd was one particularly burly man, whose cheeks were wet with tears. It was none other than the self-proclaimed Lord Wolf, Lu Ergo. Throwing his head back, he roared, "Judgment comes." Even as all of Fragrant Cloud Peak was thrown into a commotion, Bai Xiaochun was there in the medicine concocting pavilion, looking excitedly at the pill furnace in front of him. It was trembling, and a strong medicinal aroma wafted out from it as several white medicinal pills appeared. These pills currently had no names, and were not meant to be consumed by humans. In fact, if you pushed down on them too hard, they would collapse into dust. They had only one use: to make male animals incredibly attractive to whoever consumed the pill. Bai Xiaochun had filled them with several powerful stimulants, and had even gone to the trouble of procuring some spirit creature ingredients from the North Bank. The cost was high, but he had succeeded. The pills were not weak by any means. Although Bai Xiaochun wasn't sure exactly how powerful they were, he could well guess, and was sure that they weren't inferior at all. Actually, to ensure that they were as powerful as possible, he had even performed spirit enhancements on all of the ingredients before using them. Face bright with anticipation, he looked down at the white medicinal pills, trying to imagine the results of using the pills in concert with the aphrodisiac pills. He couldn't hold back from laughing. "This will be the pheromone pill. That sounds good. And the red one from before will be the aphrodisiac pill." After a bit more thought, he performed threefold spirit enhancements on all of them. In the briefest of moments, the medicinal pills completely changed. No longer were they low grade, but instead, superior grade. As for their medicinal efficacy, Bai Xiaochun's eyes shone at the mere thought of it. HMPH. Now it doesn't matter what kind of beast I face, from now on, when I say jump, they'll jump. Coughing dryly, he put the medicinal pills away. Feeling very proud of himself, he was just about to go outside and take a walk when he heard an enraged roar echoing down from the sky. Bai Xiaochun. The shocking roar of fury caused even the trees in the area to tremble. Leaves fell, to be picked up by the raging wind, which swept them to and fro. When Bai Xiaochun heard the enraged cry, he was so scared he almost jumped straight up into the air. He looked up, and saw the white-haired elder Zhou hovering up above, veins bulging out all over his neck and face. Elder Zhou seemed like a wild beast, and in fact, actually looked quite similar to the way the phoenix had a month ago. Bai Xiaochun, it was you that harmed my phoenix. On this day, even if Li Qinghao tries to interfere, I will teach you a harsh and bitter lesson. With another thunderous roar, he extended his right hand and made a vicious grasping gesture in Bai Xiaochun's direction. That gesture caused the air around Bai Xiaochun to begin to solidify. Bai Xiaochun trembled inwardly and let out a miserable shriek. A silver glow sprang out from his skin, and at the same time, a white light appeared further out as he activated the divine crane shield. From a distance, it almost looked like an eggshell. He's trying to kill me. He's trying to kill me. As soon as the light enveloped him, he ignored the pressure crushing down from Elder Zhou and unhesitatingly shot off at the highest speed possible. Eee, murmured Elder Zhou. Although he hadn't used his full strength, considering he was in the early foundation establishment stage, even a fraction of his power should have been enough to prevent any chi condensation cultivator from breaking free. Looking at the light-wreathed Bai Xiaochun fleeing off into the distance, he roared, Bai Xiaochun, do you really think I don't know that you were out to harm me even when you were back in the ovens? I know that the ginseng root that was meant for my soup was eaten by you, all the way down to the spirit rootlets. I also know that it was your idea to make the bowls shallower. And now you went and fed some medicine to my phoenix. On this very day, I will ensure that you come to understand the severe consequences of stirring up trouble in our sect. With that he gave chase. The truth was that all of the elders in the sect knew about the things that went on in the ovens. You can't blame me, Bai Xiaochun shrieked miserably. That bird of yours stole my medicinal pill. I really had nothing to do with it. Looking back over his shoulder, he saw the overly aggressive Elder Zhou, his cultivation base unfathomable. Bai Xiaochun immediately pushed forward with as much speed as possible, as if his life depended on it, rapidly transforming into nothing more than a set of afterimages. Up in midair, the male phoenix heard Bai Xiaochun's words, and his feathers immediately stood on end. Letting out a miserable squawk, he pointed his wings at Bai Xiaochun, and if he could talk, he would obviously be crying hysterically to everyone present that it was Bai Xiaochun who had given him the medicine. He most certainly hadn't stolen it. Why you? Seeing the phoenix falsely accuse him made Bai Xiaochun feel worse than before. How could he ever have imagined that, given how smart he was, he would one day be framed by a bird? Hatred filled his heart. Looking at the bird, he decided firmly in his heart that once this matter was resolved, he would ensure that bird felt what it was like to be humiliated. The bird might be a male, but Bai Xiaochun would find an even manlier bird to teach it a lesson. How dare you quibble over meaningless details? Elder Zhou said, picking up speed. As he shot toward Bai Xiaochun, he waved his sleeve, causing a massive power to shoot through the air. When it landed on Bai Xiaochun, however, he merely staggered a bit, and then picked up speed as if nothing had happened. The scene caused Elder Zhou's eyes to widen. He had used enough power to send any other outer sect disciple tumbling to the ground, and yet Bai Xiaochun treated it as if it were nothing. Bai Xiaochun was also shocked. The blow just now had shaken him down to his teeth, and left him trembling. Looking back at Elder Zhou, he quickly produced the golden crow sword and poured some spiritual power into it. The golden crow materialized, and Bai Xiaochun transformed into a golden beam of light that shot up into the air. Elder Zhou snorted coldly, and also flew up, joined by his phoenix. All of the observing disciples in the area felt quite pleased at the ability to revel in Bai Xiaochun's misfortune. Seeing him flee madly for his life enabled them all to release a bit of the anger which had been festering inside of them. Wide smiles blossomed on the faces of Chen Ziying and Zhao Yiduo, and Lu Ergo, the so-called Lord Wolf, was so happy that tears streamed down his face. The heavens do have eyes, he murmured. Flying through the air over fragrant Cloud Peak, Bai Xiaochun let out a miserable cry. Anyone who wasn't watching what was happening but heard that scream would be completely shocked. Elder Zhou, your bird's lying. I'm telling the truth, and he's making stuff up. Bai Xiaochun wanted to cry, but no tears would come. He stood atop the golden crow, pushing forward with everything he could muster. "Shut up," Elder Zhou roared. It was bad enough that Bai Xiaochun was constantly saying all kinds of things about his bird, but even worse, there were plenty of people who could hear it, and all of them had odd expressions on their faces. Elder Zhou's right hand flashed with an incantation gesture, causing a blast of air to shoot toward Bai Xiaochun. "But it's true. Your bird is falsely accusing me." Bai Xiaochun just wanted to resolve the situation, and yet, the blast of air continued to close in, leaving him trembling in fear. Somehow pushing forward with even more speed, he managed to avoid the blast, and it smashed a sizable hole into a nearby boulder. Bai Xiaochun looked over his shoulder at the hole, and his scalp went numb. Finally, he decided to call upon his most powerful backer. "I'm the junior brother of the sect leader. I'm the apprentice of Taoist Master Spirit Sieve. Nobody can help you now," Elder Zhou said, glaring. The truth was that he was actually losing a bit of face by personally chasing after Bai Xiaochun. What was even worse was that he hadn't even touched Bai Xiaochun, who was fleeing like a rabbit whose tail had been stepped on. It was truly a miserable sight. Somewhere on Fragrant Cloud Peak, Shu Baosai looked up at what was happening, mixed emotions on his face. Of course, he wasn't worried about Bai Xiaochun. Rather, he felt bad for Elder Zhou, and couldn't help but think back to his own past. "Stop running, Bai Xiaochun," Elder Zhou cried, closing in like a powerful rock. Next to him, his phoenix continued to let out piercing cries, and occasionally pointed at Bai Xiaochun with his wings. "I'm a prestige disciple," Bai Xiaochun screamed. "I've shed blood for the sect. I've performed incredible service." As he fled for his life, his words echoed out even to Violet Cauldron Peak. Many people there looked up and saw Bai Xiaochun in full flight, and strange expressions quickly filled their faces. When they realized what was happening, they couldn't hold back from laughing. "That title is given to the dead," Elder Zhou growled. "I'm going to make you into a true prestige disciple." The truth was that he didn't really plan to kill Bai Xiaochun. He just wanted to teach him a very hard lesson. Hoping to scare him, he waved his hand again, sending out another blast of wind, which caused a vortex to spring up around Bai Xiaochun. When Bai Xiaochun heard Elder Zhou's words, and then saw the wind vortex appear, he screamed even harder than before. He poured all of the spiritual power he could muster into the golden crow sword. Bai Xiaochun burst out from within the vortex, surrounded by golden light, shooting all the way to the midway point between Fragrant Cloud Peak and Mount Daoseed. It was only then that the light began to fade. Silver light glittered around him as he charged onward, screaming. He was well aware that Li Qinghao wasn't in the sect at the moment, and that the only person who could save him was his elder brother sect leader, which was why he was now heading toward Mount Daoseed. Elder Zhou was inwardly shocked that Bai Xiaochun had been able to dodge his attacks so many times, and was now sure that this was one of the reasons he'd been able to make it out alive when being pursued by the Luocan clan. However, considering that there were so many people watching, it left Elder Zhou with little face, and only served to fuel his anger. Unleashing all of his cultivation base, he shot after Bai Xiaochun once again. "Elder brother sect leader, save me!" Bai Xiaochun wailed at the top of his lungs. Whistling through the air at top speed, he continued to evade Elder Zhou as he headed toward Mount Daoseed. His incredible agility made him very slippery. Of course, if Elder Zhou truly unleashed all of his Foundation establishment divine abilities and techniques, he would probably have been able to pin Bai Xiaochun down. However, all he wanted to do was teach him a lesson. If he started using magical techniques, and didn't rein in their power perfectly, he could very well deliver a fatal blow. However, at the moment, he couldn't even hit Bai Xiaochun at all, and yet, Bai Xiaochun was screaming miserably, which caused Elder Zhou to get even more angry. He quickly performed an incantation gesture with his right hand, causing dark clouds to form in the sky above. Thunder crashed as lightning suddenly shot down toward Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun's eyes were as round as saucers. The terrifying power he sensed within the lightning left his mind somewhat blank. Eyes bloodshot, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture and then pointed out. Instantly, violet chi appeared above his head, which shot toward the lightning. Elder Zhou was astonished. He'd set out to simply scare Bai Xiaochun, and although the lightning seemed like an attack, he'd aimed it to land next to Bai Xiaochun, not on him. But now, Bai Xiaochun was actually fighting back against it, causing Elder Zhou to suddenly try to rein the lightning in. Unfortunately, he couldn't stop all of it. Violet chi swirled up from Bai Xiaochun to meet the lightning, and as it did, the image of a cauldron appeared. When it slammed into the lightning, massive rumbling sounds echoed out, shaking everything in the area. The violet chi scattered, and as for the lightning, it dimmed by about half before slamming into the ground. Bai Xiaochun's face went pale, and he let out another plaintive scream. "Save me, elder brother. Save me, master. Oh, that the spirit of my master in the heavens would save me." Elder Zhou stopped in place in midair, looking at Bai Xiaochun in surprise. Just now, he had managed to reduce the power of the lightning by about half, but even the remaining bit should have been enough to seriously injure any qi condensation cultivator. And yet, other than causing Bai Xiaochun's face to go pale, and sending his qi and blood into chaos, it had done little else. That was violet qi cauldron summoning, Elder Zhou murmured to himself. Du Lingfei and Hu Yunfei both said that Bai Xiaochun had gained enlightenment of violet qi cauldron summoning, but that level of power exceeds the 7th level of qi condensation. The battle prowess this kid can unleash with that technique is incredible. A strange light gleamed in Elder Zhou's eyes. Now that he realized Bai Xiaochun was a chosen of this caliber, some of his anger was mitigated. Furthermore, Bai Xiaochun's ear-splitting screaming left him unsure of whether to laugh or cry. With a cold snort, he once again gave chase. I don't care if the phoenix was at fault, Bai Xiaochun was the main cause. This kid is stubborn and mischievous, I need to take the chance to scare him into restraint. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.